Well, the situation in Nigeria doesn't point out, there are those in Nigeria who say that we do not have institutions, we have more of individuals. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think to a large extent we have not reinforced institutional positions. We have celebrated individuality. So there is a sense in which we do have the institutions, but they do not have any effective power. For example, half of the time you will find a situation in Nigeria where a lot of decisions have no clear-cut process.
Okay.
And
now,
people enjoy not giving it a process.
Taking us back to the president's speech, where he talked about, he was asked a question on the Sovereign National Conference, and he says he does support dialogue, but let's go back and deal with, how do you put it now, it says, but before we organize more talk shows, we must deal with resolutions from the last ones. Now,
Yes.
a picture here, a report was done about a certain area in Nigeria. The report had come forth, and they set up a committee to study the report before implementation. Now, how do we get to deal with resolutions if we are still setting up talk shops, committees, before we begin to implement?
Yeah, actually in that area, I agree with the president's sentiment. We need to implement. But then we need to ask ourselves, why have we not implemented? The reasons we have not implemented are because, again, come back to this question of rigor, people are allowed to get away with sound bites. You see, I remember my father told me a story once when he was a permanent secretary, of somebody who was giving a report. And my father was sitting behind the governor, and he said, after listening to a lot of the report, he just said, sophistry. And the then governor of the state had to ask him, what does that word mean, the military governor? And he said, a lot of sound without meaning. And then they listened to the speech for a few more minutes, and the governor said to the commissioner who was giving the speech, he said, what you said actually is suffering from that disease that just been reported. When you allow people to get away with a lot of sophistry, that's why I come back to the Japanese question, why? One of the things the president needs is somebody who is, I don't know, maybe I like to call the person a bull. A person who asks why, and asks it until everybody is tired of answering the why. You say, this is the resolution of this last something. First of all, even that resolution itself must be challenged. Why did you reach that resolution? Because we were talking about JOS a few minutes ago. Part of the problem with JOS is that different panels have brought out different resolutions, because instead of investigating the matter thoroughly, each panel gets infected by a religious grouping or a religious siding and decides which way it's going. That's
For instance, the 2011 budget,
yes.
Should we just let it slide, or should we let them get away with sound bites such as there's no record of implementation, 50 billion for unemployment, nothing to account for it, 9 months down the line?
So somebody should be, if I were the president, I would look for someone like an ombudsman or a group of ombudsmen, stubborn characters, but not also who are pragmatic, because it's one of the challenges that with some of the stubborn characters that they're very unpragmatic and they're making demands that are impossible. No, I want somebody who you know can get results, but who you also know is stubborn about asking the questions. You come up with a proposal. We want to build a road from here to Sokoto. The question is why? I'm not saying you don't want to build one. I mean,
because he has to understand what he wants to do.
Yes, I was leading a think tank for one person, and the person said, we want to have free education in my state, and I said, why? And the person looked at me surprised. He said, you don't want free education. I said, I didn't tell you that, but I want you to tell me why you want free education. Because until we get to the point where we have a reason for wanting it, then we're not achieving it. Then when you now finish telling me why you want it, then tell me how you want to get at it. And then I won't allow you to get away with sound bites. For example, one of the sound bites is this issue about the banks giving loans. Part of why the bank hasn't given credit is that it's not profitable. It's not the banks don't want to give credit. Unless you back up their profitability, unless you back up the process, unless you create a situation whereby if I set up a farm in Ijebu side, I can take my materials and bring them to Lagos without any problems. Then it's a long route. It's not something you can change in 1 year.
That's a big why with security.
It is a big one, but it also, very quickly reminds us of what the president actually said about the FEC meeting. He did say, well, the last one they had was the longest. Maybe we had more than enough whys in that particular meeting, but
and that if you can have enough whys in the FEC meeting.
That's it.
Too many topics under discussion.
So, I was going to ask, so with such meetings coming in weekly, aren't we bothered about the problems we still have? We thought if we have a body that meets on a weekly basis, we have a National Assembly that is also bothered on some of these issues, and we have loads and loads of advisors from the local government down to the top. How come we're still in dire straits as a nation.
Well, you know, one of the biggest problems you have in leadership with big organizations, and the nation is the biggest organization of all, is what we call the tyranny of the urgent. If you go into a federal executive council meeting, you will likely see that none of the items on the agenda can even go below surface. You have, I don't know how many ministries now because numbers keep on changing. I think you have 30-something ministries. If every ministry's issue alone is discussed for 5 minutes, what that guarantees you is 150 minutes of discussion. And 5 minutes is not even enough for the Honorable Minister to say, Mr. President, members of council.
All the protocols
duly observed 5 minutes ago. So that tells you how much work. That is why the first thing that the president needs to have established, and that's still a gap, is he needs to have established a body. I don't know how big it's going to be, how small it's going to be, but that also requires thinking. That whose job is to literally maybe support the Secretary to the Federal Government of the Federation to ensure that the government's objectives are delivered stepwise. Anything you don't inspect, you don't expect. Anything you don't push. You almost need a guy who walks down into a minister's office and the minister breaks out in sweat because he knows this man is going to ask him hard questions and this man is going to make demands and this man is going to follow through, because in this complexity of running government, ideas get lost.
So I know we're out of time here, but again, quickly, if the president has had to see, which is natural in all climes, should we also find it so difficult to get access to ministers as well as advisors?
You mean we, the public?
Yes.
No, we shouldn't, but again...
Because at least, if some of us who have the privilege of traveling, we've met congressmen, we've met senators, and when they come out of their offices, and even some mayors, you wouldn't even believe that these are the personalities you get to see. So how come, if you really can't get to the president, the one representing the president, the people really can't get access to him or her?
I think that's one of the challenges. It's a carryover, and it shouldn't be, but it is. And then it now depends on each individual. But you see, those are symptoms. When the president, like I said, has somebody who say to the Minister of Environment, hey, we are not getting any response from you. What's going on? The Minister of Environment, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Health will discover that if they're not in touch with the public and open to you, they cannot deliver on what they need to deliver. You see, one thing leads to the other. If we set procedures, minister, have a particular day open to see the public. If it's in Nigerian environment, let me tell you what will happen. You will come out of the minister, and the minister's day to see the public, there'll be 50,000 people out trying to see the minister, half of whom are trying to say, Minister, I need a contract. Can you help me out? And so it will be non-productive. But if the minister knows that you set him, you see, that's why it starts from the preliminaries, the foundations. What targets are set for them? How are these targets to be monitored? How do they demand? It is those targets that will lead to the natural opening, where the minister will maybe not see the general public, can't see everybody, but will create a situation whereby he can know what's happening in the public, create a situation whereby maybe Suleiman can come and give him some advice, because he's the best man in that field, because he now knows he needs it. You see, what you've done is you create the pressure that leads to the results you want. That is what is missing at the moment in the running of our government.